The morning sun filtered through the thin curtains as Mary stood in the kitchen, pouring cereal into 2 small bowls. The rhythmic ticking of the wall clock filled the silence, broken only by the chatter of her grandsons, Toby and Liam. Their laughter was the only warmth that kept Mary going these days. "Make sure they don't eat too many sweets, okay?" Claire said briskly, adjusting her silk scarf in the mirror near the doorway. She was dressed elegantly, as always in a beige coat that probably cost more than Mary's entire wardrobe. "Yes, dear," Mary replied softly, smiling even as her heart tightened. Claire slung her designer bag over her shoulder. "And remember, Liam's got his medicine at noon. Oh, and don't let them watch too much TV. Honestly, I don't know what I'd do without you." Mary's smile widened faintly. "It's no trouble." Claire turned, her eyes scanning the spotless kitchen. "Well, it shouldn't be. I mean, you do nothing else all day anyway, right?" she said with a little laugh, as if it were a harmless joke. The words stung more than Mary let on. She simply nodded, brushing invisible crumbs off the counter. She had learned long ago that silence was safer than defending herself. When the door shut behind Claire and her car engine faded down the street, Mary finally sat down. The boys were already arguing about which cartoon to watch. Her tea had gone cold. Once upon a time, she had dreamed of quiet mornings in her old-age gardening, reading, maybe visiting her sister by the seaside. But ever since Daniel, her son, had married Claire, her life had slowly become a loop of diapers, dishes, and demands. Her hands, once strong and proud from years of factory work, now trembled with fatigue. Every day, she told herself she was doing it for Daniel, because that's what mothers do. They endure. As the boys laughed on the carpet, Mary smiled faintly. She loved them deeply, but somewhere inside, a small voice whispered a truth she had long ignored. Love shouldn't feel like servitude. She sighed, whispering to herself, maybe one day they'll see how much I do. But deep down, she already knew no one saw her anymore. Not her son, not her daughter-in-law. To them, she was just the babysitter. And though she didn't know it yet, this quiet morning would be one of the last times she accepted that role. The next few weeks blurred together. Early mornings, late nights, and the same weary rhythm. Mary cooked, cleaned, and chased after the boys, while Claire came and went as she pleased. Claire's voice echoed through the house like a constant reminder of who was in charge. "Mom, Claire's just career-focused," Daniel said one night when Mary hinted she was feeling tired. "You know how demanding her work is." Mary nodded quietly. "I understand, son, but sometimes I feel more like a servant than family." Daniel looked uncomfortable, rubbing the back of his neck. "Don't say that. Claire appreciates you." Mary wanted to believe that. Truly she did. But that belief shattered one afternoon when she overheard Claire talking on the phone in the patio. "She's basically my unpaid nanny," Claire said with a laugh. "I mean, come on, she lives here rent-free. The least she can do is watch the kids. What else does she have to do? It's not like she has a life." Mary froze behind the half-open door, the broom slipping slightly from her hand. Her chest ached, not from anger, but from a deep, hollow hurt. After everything she had sacrificed after years of raising Daniel alone, working double shifts, skipping meals to save for his future, she was reduced to a joke. That night she couldn't sleep. The moonlight spilled across the room, illuminating the photo of her late husband on the dresser. She whispered to the frame, "We raised a good boy, but somehow I lost myself along the way." The next morning, Claire's voice sliced through the silence again. "Oh, by the way, I'll be going to Bali next week. Business conference. You'll manage the kids, right?" Mary looked up from her knitting, meeting Claire's impatient stare. "Bali," she repeated softly. "Yes, Bali," Claire said, already tapping on her phone. 5 days, maybe 6. "You don't mind, do you? You do nothing all day anyway." This time, the words didn't sting, they settled differently. like a match striking dry wood. Mary smiled faintly, her voice calm. "Of course, dear, I'll manage." Claire didn't notice the quiet steel behind her tone. She simply nodded and walked away, humming to herself, thinking she had won again. But as Mary cleared the table later that night, her mind felt sharper than it had in years. Every scrape of a dish, every fold of a towel built toward one thought: enough. She was done being invisible, done being used. If Claire wanted to treat her as though she did nothing, then Mary would show her what nothing really looked like. Her plan wasn't revenge out of hatred, it was freedom out of self-respect. And though no one saw it yet, the quiet grandmother was finally ready to make her move. The morning after Claire's announcement, Mary woke before dawn. The sky outside was painted in soft streaks of pink, and for the first time in years, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long while: clarity. As the boys slept, she brewed her tea and pulled an old wooden box from under her bed. Inside were papers she hadn't touched in years: the deed to her small countryside cottage, a faded photograph of her and her husband smiling in front of it, and a few savings bonds she'd tucked away long ago. Her trembling fingers smoothed over the photo. That little house had been her dream once, a place of peace. Now it was about to become her escape. That afternoon, while Claire was out shopping and the boys napped, Mary made her first call. "Irene," she said softly into the phone. A warm laugh answered. "Mary, it's been ages." "Yes," Mary smiled. "I was wondering, is that caretaker position at your inn still available?" "It is," Irene replied instantly. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" "I think I'm ready," Mary said quietly. Over the next few days, she moved carefully, making sure no one noticed her plans. She sold a few personal items online: old jewelry, some furniture, and quietly arranged for movers to deliver her essentials to the cottage by the lake. She also left envelopes hidden in her drawer, one for Daniel, containing a portion of her savings, and one for Claire with a short note: "For the kids. They deserve better than resentment." The boys sensed her kindness as always, unaware that every bedtime story, every hug that week carried a quiet goodbye. Toby would giggle as she tucked him in, saying, "Grandma, promise you won't leave us." And each night Mary would kiss his forehead and whisper, "I'll always love you, sweetheart." When Claire finally returned from another business trip, she didn't even thank Mary. Instead, she wrinkled her nose. "This house looks lived in. Honestly, can't you keep things in order? I'm exhausted, and now I have to travel again next week. Paris this time. You'll stay, right?" Mary smiled faintly, her heart strangely calm. "Of course, dear, I'll be here." That night, she packed her last suitcase, the small one her husband had once used. As she zipped it closed, she looked around the dim room, filled with memories of laughter, chaos, and neglect. Then she placed her hand over her heart and whispered, "No more tears, Mary. It's time." For the first time in years, she slept peacefully. Her plan was set. By the time Claire returned from Paris, she would finally understand what it meant to lose the woman who held her family together. But by then, it would be far too late. The day of Claire's grand Paris trip arrived with its usual rush of perfume, suitcases, and impatience. She swept through the house in her elegant red coat, shouting last-minute instructions while checking her reflection in every mirror. "Same routine, Mary," she said briskly. "Toby needs lunch at noon, Liam's got his medicine at 6, and don't forget to iron Daniel's shirts. You've got it, right?" Mary nodded, her face composed and warm. "Of course, dear. I've got it all handled." Claire barely looked at her. Good, try to keep things organized this time. As the front door slammed behind her, Mary looked around the quiet house one last time. The morning light glowed softly through the curtains, and the smell of pancakes lingered in the air. She moved slowly, carefully folding the boys' clothes, tidying the toys, and placing a small note on the kitchen counter. By noon she was gone. Her suitcase sat by her side, as the taxi drove down the street. She didn't look back. Instead, she stared out the window, her hands trembling not from fear, but from the realization that she was finally free. The city disappeared behind her as open fields stretched out ahead. By evening, she arrived at the small lakeside cottage she once dreamed of retiring in. The soft breeze carried the scent of pine and water. Waiting at the porch was Irene, smiling warmly. "You made it," she said. Mary nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "Yes, I finally did." Meanwhile, back at home, Claire returned from the airport 2 hours later. She had forgotten her passport. As she stepped into the house, she froze. It was too quiet. The boys were crying in the living room, toys scattered, and the breakfast Mary usually prepared was missing. "Mom," she shouted, no answer. On the counter lay a single piece of paper in Mary's neat handwriting. "Dear Claire, you once said I do nothing all day, so now I'm finally doing nothing. Just for myself. The boys are yours to love, raise, and understand. Thank you for teaching me it's never too late to live again. Mary." The paper shook in Claire's trembling hand. For the first time, her voice broke. She really left. When Daniel came home, she was still sitting at the table, staring at the note. He read it silently, his eyes softening. "She warned us in her own quiet way," he murmured. "We just never listened." Days later, a postcard arrived. It showed a peaceful lakeside view, golden sunlight over rippling water. On the back, written in elegant cursive, were just a few words. "Dear Daniel, don't worry. I'm safe, happy, and finally free. Give the boys my love, Mom." Daniel held the card against his chest, tears welling in his eyes. Claire, standing beside him, finally felt the weight of her guilt pressed down. The house, once bustling with Mary's quiet care, now felt empty, lifeless. At the lake, Mary sat on her porch each morning, knitting while the sun rose over the still water. Guests at the inn waved as they passed, and she would smile, truly smile. For the first time in decades, there were no orders, no mocking words, no demands. Only peace, freedom, and the quiet dignity she'd always deserved. Mary had finally done nothing, and it was the most beautiful thing she'd ever done.